Hey, it's Sonia, and welcome to the SMARTA Podcast.
Today on the SMARTA Podcast, we're going to deep dive into what it truly means to be human at work with none other than Joshua M. Evans. Joshua is a #1 best-selling author and a leading voice in the future of workplace culture. With over 15 years of studying human behavior in professional environments, he's helped companies like American Express, Merck, and FIS unlock the real power of their people, especially in a world increasingly shaped by AI. He brings powerful insights on authenticity, purpose, and connection in today's evolving work landscape. He is the author of 2 books, Purpose and Perish, The Quest for Meaning and the Future of Work, a book that provides deep insights and practical tools for the modern world, and Enthusiastic You, where he is challenging the idea of a boring, mediocre workplace attitude, encouraging people to be their enthusiastic selves. When he's not guiding leaders or delivering keynotes, you'll find him in Texas with his wife and 3 spirited kids chasing meaningful moments and new adventures. All right. Now, if you're ready for a conversation full of energy, humanity, and practical wisdom, make sure to go ahead and share this episode with all your loved ones or all your friends that are ready to get real and show up with the right attitude for every single day. Joshua M. Evans, welcome on the SMARTA Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to get into my discussion with you today. Joshua, you're a #1 best-selling author, a workplace culture expert, a speaker. You've shared on stage with leaders your thoughts, and you've done this to companies like American Express and Merck. You have experience over 15 years studying human behavior in the workplace and helping people reconnect to their enthusiasm and purpose at work. Here's where I'm going to take you first. This episode is brought to you by SMAR, an executive search and talent advisory firm that knows people are the true engine of any organization. SMAR doesn't just fill roles, they find the right match, aligning talent with culture to unlock real potential. Because sometimes what makes someone extraordinary isn't on their resume, it's what's waiting to be discovered. Could you talk directly with a person listening? And from all your experience in engagement, purpose, and human-centered leadership, what would your top 3 key takeaways for the listener be?
So the first key takeaway is that I don't think that challenges or problems that are put in front of ourselves or in our lives, whether it's a personal life or professional life, problems that get put in front of you, they're not there to stop you. And I think for many years, I would enter a situation and I'd feel like a challenge that was put in front of me, right, that arises is there and it's stopping me from reaching my goal. And then recently I heard a fascinating fact that I didn't know about. And it kind of changed the way that I view it. And so what I found really fascinating is that, so when they were in the 90s, they built these things called biodomes. Their goal was to study how plants and animals worked in these controlled environments. So they brought in the best soil, they had the right pH levels in the water, the right nutrients, everything. And scientists were watching as these trees began to grow. But as the trees began to grow, they would fall over before they reached maturity. And so why aren't these trees, growing into full adulthood? And they couldn't figure it out. And so they looked at the soil, they looked at the trees, there's no diseases. And they were racking their brains because all the science said that these trees should have grown bigger than they would have in a natural environment because they had everything that they needed. But they forgot one variable to these trees, and it was wind. You see, for years, right, for I would say centuries, botanists thought that trees grew their roots in search of water and nutrients. And while that's partially true, the real thing that stimulates root growth is as a tree is growing, the wind buffets the branches and the leaves of the tree, and that forces the tree to grow its roots deeper and wider to create a stronger foundation for the tree. And when you look at this with our lives, we're kind of like those trees. We need that wind, that resistance, so that we can grow our foundations as an individual bigger. So when these challenges or these problems are put in front of us, it's not there to stop us. It's there to help us grow our foundations wider. And so my first piece of advice, and I know this has gone longer than I probably meant to, is embrace the challenges of your life, right? These are opportunities, right, to rise to the occasion, to seek out new solutions. And so embrace challenges would be like the first point I would make. The second point I would make is we have to manage our influences in our life because constantly we're being influenced by the things that come in and out of our lives, whether it's social media, emails, conversations, text messages. I mean, I've held hostage on like 3 different family text chains, and it's horrible, right? And so all these things can influence us, both negative and positively, but it has a huge impact. If we think back 100 years, right? People wouldn't see an advertisement for weeks, months at a time, and now we're bombarded daily with over 10,000 advertisements. You got to think that's got to do something to the human psyche. It causes us to become anxious. It causes us to become worried. And the problem is if we're not managing the things that are influencing us in our lives, we are going to be managed by those influences. And so that's the other big piece that I like to tell people is that we have to manage our influences. Otherwise, our influences will be managing us, and we'll find ourselves doing stuff that we didn't necessarily expect ourselves to, or being the kind of person that we didn't want ourselves to be. We have to be cognizant of it. If we're just blindly doom scrolling, those things can really negatively affect us. And so I think being cognizant of that and being protective of your I'll say your psychological well-being is huge, right? You have to manage your influences, and not enough people do that today. The last thing I would say, the third point is, in whatever you do, right? Whether it's work related, whether it's personal life, whether it's relationships, you should constantly be moving towards meaning. And I say that because it's easy for somebody to look at like their job that they're in and be like, this is what my role is. We know what that, it's a title, right? It sits in your email signature, it's in your LinkedIn profile, but that's not compelling to the deep human need to know that their work matters. We're also very good about describing what somebody in our role does. And if we go back to the professional, it's the list of KPIs, it's the list of like tasks that we have to do in that job, right? What you do in a role, right? And we can even back this out. If we think about like a personal role, like I know my role as a father. I have 3 young children. I know what somebody in that role does, right? I help them bathe, I cook their meals, I fix their lunches, I chauffeur them to school and to soccer practice. That's what somebody in that role does. But that doesn't fulfill that deep human need to know the work I'm doing actually matters. And so what I think people need to do is get beyond that shallow into the pool is what I call it, right? What a role is or what somebody in that role does. What we really need to be focusing on what doing great work in that role actually means to all those that depend on us. So in work, like I know what my title is. I'm a keynote speaker, an author, whatever title you want to give me. That's not compelling to what I do. I know what somebody in that role does, right? I go on awesome podcasts like this. I post on social media, I market, and then I go give speeches. I really wanted to derive meaning in my work. I would have to think about what me doing great work, right? Writing a great sentence in a book or saying a great line on stage that changes somebody's life. That's what my work actually means, is that somebody walks away with tools so they can go be more fulfilled in their work. Helping change these lives in a positive way. That's what my work really means. If we're going to go back to me as a parent, we know what my role is and what somebody in that role does, but what it means is that my kids feel safe and loved, and what it means to me is that I'm watching these young people turn into the kind of people that I want to be in the world. And so we need to constantly be moving towards meaning, away from the shallow-ended expectations, right? I think we get stuck there because people chase titles, they chase certain organizations they want to work with, a lot of people are just chasing the paycheck, and that can become such a shallow existence. And so we'll just list out all 3 of those things again. First, embrace the challenges of your life, manage the influences in your life, and constantly be moving towards meaning. Those would be my 3 biggest pieces of advice.
And I love them. And I think you're completely spot on with, especially in today's world, all the influences that have tripled and have doubled more than ever now, especially us scrolling on Instagram or social media, which has a huge impact on how we think or on how we manage our lives in terms of how much are we getting worked, how much are we working on for our purpose, or how much are we shifting towards bad habits and letting that consume our lives.
Well, and it starts off very innocently, doesn't it? Like, I'll give you an example. So the other day, I walked to my office, I'm waiting for my computer to boot up, and I looked at Facebook on my phone. And a friend of mine posted something infuriating, right? Like fist clenching, teeth gritting, like anger surged through my body. And you're like, what did he say, John? I'm going to tell you, okay? But you get the full experience.
All right.
His status update said, and I quote, "I'm so excited, 2 hours till wheels up to Tahiti." Right, and so I should be happy for my friend going on his honeymoon. Good for him, right? And I did what anybody did. I hit like spitefully. And then what happened next is my computer booted up, and the first thing I did is I went to Google. How much are flights to Tahiti? What's the best time of year to go to Tahiti? It turns out all year is the best time of year to go to Tahiti. And what shouldn't have impacted my day, right? It was a silly little post that somebody did. It shouldn't have influenced my day, but it's already like closing in on lunchtime, and I'm still Googling how much of those, little cabanas over the water. I have no intention on going to Tahiti in the next year. I kind of want to, but I have just stolen part of my morning because I allowed this one little post, which was a positive thing, to influence the rest of my day, and it took me off on this tangent. And I think it's too easy in today's society for us to get distracted and pulled in the wrong directions.
Absolutely. I agree. And just hearing you say that, I can reflect on my proper own experiences that have led me to spend a more than perfect amount of time on something that really, at the end of the day, didn't matter and probably just didn't help with my mood at all. And I want to shift now to your book, Enthusiastic You.
Oh, the first one. Yes.
Yeah, the first one. And you talk about rejecting the mediocre workplace attitude. What do you think makes people lose this enthusiasm that they have about you, which you have a lot, and you're already transforming it to the audience. But how can someone just starting out, avoid that trap?
Well, I think everybody starts, when you start a new job, everybody's excited, right? You show up early, you're excited, you get your cup of coffee, you're going to take on the world. And then day 500, you want to switch the decaf and the regular coffee just to mess with people. And what happened, right? It's not that our job changed. I would argue that our perspective of that job changed, right? Because in the beginning, our intentions are so idealistic. Our goals are so definitive, and our sense of purpose behind the work is very clear. Like a glass door that gets handled too often, smudges begin to appear. It obstructs, it distorts our view of the role that we find ourselves in. And it happens in all of our roles, right? It can happen in a role as, the manager at XYZ or the VP of blah, blah, blah. But it also happens in our personal roles, like our role as parent or friend or partner. We can lose sight of why we cared so much. And I think that happens in the day-to-day minutia, right? It's all the daily annoyances that we have to deal with, right? The unread emails and the Slack messages and the LinkedIn updates and the recommendations. All these little teeny fragments get in the way of us remembering why we cared about the work. And I think once again, that comes to the impact of the work we're actually doing. And too often people kind of put blinders on and they don't see the full impact. I'll give you a good example. So ordered a pizza the other day, pizza delivery driver brought it to our house. I paid him, tipped him, he leaves, but he doesn't know what he's actually doing, right? He knows his job is a pizza delivery driver. He knows what he does. He picks up the pizza and he delivers it to this house. But does he really know what he's providing me? If you were to think about that, he would love his job. So what he doesn't know, this pizza driver, is that what he's done for me is he's allowed me to not have to cook for 45 minutes. Meaning I get to spend 45 more minutes with my kids. So my kids love pizza. He's made their day. He's made me look like a good parent. Everybody's happy, right? And now we get to sit down at our table and eat pizza together and have this, and commune, and have this conversation, have this collective family experience together. What he's really providing to me is a family experience. It's not just a pizza, right? It's not just dough and sauce and cheese and pepperonis. It's something much deeper. And I think too often we allow ourselves to stay in that shallow end, right? Where I'm just delivering pizzas. And it's any role, if you follow the impact the work actually has, unless you're doing something nefarious or illegal, every role can go deep enough to find the impact it has on another human being. And I think that's where people can really set themselves apart from others, is to actually care and then remember why you care. And it's just hard. It's hard when we have deadlines and policies and we're having to deal with, I guess, the bureaucratic nature that comes into play in a traditional office work environment. It's difficult. I mean, I spent over a decade in the corporate world, and it's not always easy, because it's easier to default to being frustrated, to being angry, or to blaming somebody else. It takes a lot more introspection to be like, look, how can I positively change this situation, right? And so, to be honest, a lot of the tools and ideas that come into my books, the first one and especially the second one, they come from being in businesses, right? And seeing what doesn't work, what does work, observing that what is the human condition. And it's pretty wild, because I mean, I've worked for companies that had 6 employees. I've worked for companies that had 90,000 employees. And so the markers are still there for the people that actually care. You can tell, you can see them. Like, that person really loves their job. They're engaged in it. They are emotionally connected to their contribution. And that's what I love to see. And I think that's what businesses are struggling to find right now. They have people with only one foot on the merry-go-round joining their organizations that don't actually care. And so that's why you have this huge drop in service levels and a huge drop in productivity. It's wild to look at, and it's kind of sad, because I think it's not just the businesses and the consumers of whatever products or services that are missing out. The individuals that choose mediocrity, and fine, I'll just do the bare minimum, right before bare minimum Mondays. It's those people that are missing out the most, because they could actually have the same job, still get paid, but actually enjoy the 40 hours or 35 hours that they're spending working. Like, why wouldn't you just embrace that idea and embrace, I guess, this direction? And so it's disappointing and frustrating for me to see how easy it is for somebody to do it and them not actually take action.
Mm-hmm. And I really like that you said that first you have to actually care, and then you have to remember why to care. Because I think what you touched upon there is so real for a lot of the new generation entering the workforce, thinking that they're just starting out on that entry level, wishing that they would be much higher up the ranks way quicker. And they're wondering, well, I'm only getting my paychecks in, and what is the value that I'm giving? And so I think that what you said just there is so impactful, because from the person listening just now, if they can already shift 1% to the mindset that you already have, I think that they will be instantly a lot more happy in their workplace, a lot more happy in their relationships, whether it is family or work or romance. And a lot of people actually struggle with being told that they're too much, and they're told that to tone it down or be more realistic. What would you say to someone that feels like their energy or their passion is too much for their work?
So that is the story of my life. I know it's in the first book, right? And it's, yeah. I am constantly told that, hey, you need to calm down. You're too much for this situation. But to be honest with you, I'm not. You just can't handle me at my full. And I'm going to be honest, like I have to tone it down. Like if I was to go like full Joshua on stage, it would be a little scary. It'd be wild. And I have to make sure that my message is, I'll say, is received, right? That they can actually catch it. And so I have to put it in a way that they would like it. And so I get to use my energy the way that I want. But what I would say to somebody that's facing a situation where they feel like they're too much for a situation, and this, I'm not talking about people that are too dramatic. I'm talking about people that are enthusiastic, okay? So I just want to make that clarification. Enthusiasm is an amazing thing. In fact, it comes from the Greek enthusiasmos, which means possessed by God and doing what he meant you to do, which is pretty wild to think about as the term enthusiastic means. But enthusiasm, it's much deeper. It's not just being excited or having energy. It's actually being passionate about something. And that's having this emotional draw to really have some sort of an impact. That's what enthusiasm is. And so when people try to squish enthusiasm, I would argue it's usually done out of either jealousy or misunderstanding, right? They're either jealous that this person's excited and they don't want them to be excited, which is, I've definitely seen that, or they don't understand the enthusiasm behind it. And it's not because they don't necessarily care about the situation, it's because they haven't looked at it from another person's perspective. And so my advice would be find a better place where you fit. Find somebody that values that character trait, because not everybody's enthusiastic like I am, and probably not everybody should be. But there is a lack of that in most workplaces. And so I would argue that those sorts of people are invaluable to a team because they can bring the entire team dynamic to a new level, right? Enthusiastic people are usually more productive because they're like, go, 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 let's get stuff done. Mind you, they need people there to throttle them, otherwise they'll go in 1,000 different directions. But I think it's an invaluable asset to any team or any organization because it is so rare and it does have such a positive impact on everybody else on the team.
And it does spread out like a ripple effect to the people working beside you that feel more encouraged, more confident to take on the day. And I want to get to what some of your most simple daily habits or mindsets are when we're talking about young professionals now that can adopt or help them stay enthusiastic or stay motivated, even when they're stuck in repetitive tasks or even entry-level roles.
Okay, so we'll start with, I guess, my routines, and then I'll go into like some tips and tricks for that. So, and I haven't always been like this, but I currently get up very early. I get up around 5:15 in the morning, and I have an hour-long routine I do at the beginning of the day. It includes journaling, reading, meditation, visualization, and exercise. And so I do all these things in the morning to put myself in the right spot. And I've noticed, and I've read a book about it. It was fascinating. And what it kind of, I'm going to try it, right? And so you challenge yourself to try new things because if you don't make changes, change won't happen. And so I started doing it a couple years ago and like it's become an absolute essential part of my day. If I don't do that at the beginning of my day, like if I sleep in even on a Saturday, if I sleep in and like don't handle myself in the morning, the day can get away from me. I'm less focused, I'm less productive. And so I found that this puts me at my best spot. And now everybody has different things that put them at their best, I'll say, mindset for the day, right? You have a pump up song, maybe you have this is my favorite coffee mug I'm taking on the world today. We all have those things. And I think recognizing them is one of the biggest benefits you can do is recognize what puts you at your best, right? Like think about if you're having like a really productive, really awesome day, what did you do that morning that kind of set you off on that, right? So observation is a big thing for anybody. I'm not saying my morning routine should be used by everybody. It works for me, but that's because that's what I need in my life. But then again, the rest of my life is very chaotic, right? Like traveling to cities and speaking and, managing 3 children. Like the rest of my life is very chaotic. I need that 1 hour of calm and of deliberate intention in my day to set me on this path. Like I did it this morning, right? And I did it yesterday morning. I do it every morning just because I want to put myself in a space where I can be at my best. Now, if you're in a job and you have these menial tasks like you were talking about, some of the best things you can do is to gamify it, right? To gamify, I'll give you a great example. I had a roommate in college that was pre-med and he was always studying biology and he didn't like to study, but what he did is he would take Skittles and he would place them down the page that he was reading, right? Skittles, every paragraph. And he would read the paragraph, eat a Skittle. Read the paragraph, eat a Skittle. And it's a simple little thing, but it got him through the book because he would wait until he finished that paragraph before he'd eat that Skittle. And so maybe he's doing a little bit of self-delusion. He's tricking himself a little bit. But it's a fascinating idea when you gamify these little aspects. And a great example I've seen on like a larger scale for a business. There's this business that I was talking with, that I worked with, and they have a call center, right? So people call in with problems and they're supposed to field and help these answers. And it can be a really grueling job. If you've ever met anybody that's worked for a call center, I worked at a call center for 3 days in college. It was horrible, right? You're dealing with some really bad and like rough conversations on the phone. People are usually not happy when they call in. In fact, I also ended up being in customer support in one of my jobs later for a large corporation, and it's horrible. And so what their manager decided to do for this call center, he goes, we're going to make this a game. All right, guess what we're going to do? We're going to put up giant scoreboards in their call center. So every time somebody completes a call, boom, your numbers go up. And so in real time, you're watching people. So they're watching, okay, I got to get another call. I got to try and be. So now you've gamified the tasks you want your employees to complete. And so now that they're competing to complete the tasks you wanted, you've gamified it. Their customers are handled better. Calls are fielded better. The employees themselves are happier, so they're treating your customers that are calling in better. It's a huge game changer. And so we hear about gamification of work. It's absolutely enjoyable, and it's essential if we want to really get these younger people involved in the work itself and keep them engaged in that work, right? Because what's really wild about that call center, they don't have the same turnover every other call center does. Like other call centers have like 120% turnover. Like they lose every one of their employees 1.25 times a year. They don't have this one because they've changed the way that particular job is done. It's not hugely innovative, but it's doing a small tweak, right? It's taking this gamer mentality and adding it to the workplace. And why wouldn't you do stuff like that? Mind you, that particular solution doesn't work for every job, right? I mean, you couldn't have like 3 pizza delivery drivers with their I guess you could, but I'm not sure that they would care. But it's fascinating. So I think gamifying the work is a huge thing. And you don't have to do this on like a huge, broad sweeping company-wide basis. You can do it for just yourself, for just your small team. But finding little things that you can do to kind of make the hard pieces of the work more enjoyable is huge. Because you're not going to be getting big wins every day, which is what we want, right? And whatever job we're doing, we want kudos every day. We want big wins every day. But that's not the reality of any of this business, right? So like, I have to gamify aspects of my business too. Like reaching out to people and marketing. Like those aren't tasks I want to do. What do I want to do? I want to write more books and I want to get on stage. But I have to do all this other work in the background to get to do that. In fact, it was funny, I was thinking about this yesterday. I have a lovely garden. We have tomatoes and lots of peppers and green beans and stuff. And I was in my garden, right, and I'm watering it. And a couple of my peppers have not yielded any peppers yet. Some of them have, but I'm still watering them. I have to water them, otherwise they'll never get peppers. So I'm sitting there watering them, and then, there's a couple of weeds down there. I got to pick the weeds. And I was thinking, wait a second. This is a perfect analogy for any other job, right? My goal is to grow these plants bigger, right? And if I don't water them every day, they're not going to. If I don't weed every day, then the plants aren't going to yield as much. And so me constantly tending to this garden is the same thing as our jobs. We have all these menial tasks that we have to do so that we can have the larger impact, where the larger impact is my plants grow, I have fresh vegetables, my kids eat more healthy, I feel better, and I save a ridiculous amount of money at the grocery store. Like that's the real end game of me having a garden. But you have to do all those small little tasks that don't seem fun or that may seem like menial work. But it doesn't matter how menial a job feels or how mundane a task seems. If you can remember that the bigger impact further down the line, that's how we can stay engaged and actually care about the small tasks. Is to remember what those are contributing towards the bigger goal or the bigger idea behind it.
And big wins don't come without the small wins every single day. You have to line them up brick by brick to get to make a wall. It doesn't just happen overnight and boom, you wake up with something right inside of your right in front of your face. And with this, I want to take you on your second book, Purpose or Perish. Because right before I got into the green room with you here, I looked you up on YouTube and you had this 9-part series of redefining your purpose at work. And I think that this book also ties in perfectly with that, because young professionals today struggle a lot with burnout, confusion, and even lack of meaning, which is a lot of the stuff that you tackle down in that book. I want to know now, Joshua, why does purpose get lost so easily?
Because we forget. And I'll kind of explain it. When you start a job, right, you see the impact it's making, right? I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm not going to come up with one off the top of my head right now. But you see the bigger impact, right? Like, I know this is what this company does. But then once you get in there, you're like, oh man, you're having to deal with all these problems, right? The challenges that you're supposed to be embracing, right? New policies, new bosses, new employees, new handbook, right?
I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Computer Generated Solutions. In today's fast-moving business world, the right partnerships make all the difference. With over 4 decades of expertise, CGS delivers world-class business applications, enterprise learning solutions, and outsourcing services across 45 countries. From fashion and healthcare to finance and technology, CGS helps businesses scale effectively and elevate customer experiences. Find out how CGS can support your company's success today by visiting www.reignite.cgsinc.com.
New interactions with clients, whatever your job is, it seems new. It's got this new, it's like a new car, right? After a while, you don't realize that you're in this really nice car. And it doesn't take long. It takes a few weeks, and all of a sudden, the cool new features on whatever car you just got don't seem as shiny. They don't seem as awesome. Mm-hmm. It happens with roles too, and I think it's funny. So I remember the last time I got a new vehicle, I was driving it, and it's awesome. I loved my new truck, and it had all the bells and whistles. It was great. And it kind of wore off, right? After a time, you get accustomed to it, right? Just like nice hotels, just like luxury clothing, you get used to it, right? It doesn't seem as novel anymore once you've had it around for a while. And so after a couple of weeks, my truck doesn't seem as awesome. And then I went and drove my wife's car, which is 10 years older than mine. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. My poor wife, she's having to drive around in this. Like, I felt like a bad husband. And so it's funny how easy we get accustomed to new things, right? But in a job, once you get accustomed to it, you can't like go spend a day and go like to your old job and be like, oh yeah, that was horrible. This is better. We don't have that luxury, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's hard. We forget what we're doing. I think some of the best things I've seen, and there's a really cool, it's an assisted living facility in the northeast part of the United States. But what they do, and it's a company-wide practice, they do at every one of their facilities because they have dozens of these facilities where they care for the elderly. But all of their leaders and managers gather up in the morning, every morning, and they read positive reviews that they've received from the families of the people that live there and from the actual members of their communities. And so they'll read stuff like, hey, thank you so much. Dad has started a new lease on life at your property. We love to see this new pep in his step, right? Or mom is so excited to be moving in. She's already made friends. What a wonderful thing. And so now you're reinforcing what they're really doing, right? Like most meetings when you go to them, it would be for that company. Okay, so we need this thing done at the facility. We need to check on Miss Johnson. We need to worry about what's going on in the kitchen, right? And we need to staff this. They go straight into what needs to be done. But what this company does so much better is that they go, hey guys, remember, this is why we're doing it. When they read these positive comments, like this is the real impact, right? So when you go and you have this conversation to get a new manager for the kitchen, you're doing it so that we can serve these people, so we can have these huge life-changing experiences for our community residents. And so they have done a phenomenal, they do it every level. Their maintenance team will get together ahead of time and say, hey, check this out, they just read this. We love the new, pool that they installed. It's awesome. Hey guys, look at that. They like something we did. We're impacting these lives positively. They do it on all levels. And I think if more companies could do something like this, right, where you remind people why they're actually doing it, right? The meaning behind it, that impact further beyond what the role is and what somebody in that role does. If you can remind them what doing great work means to everyone that depends on them, that's how you can get people to actually care, right? And how you can retain purpose in the work that you're doing.
And this ties in on what you just told me about why it's so important to remind people, because it's so easy to forget about what your purpose is It ties on to Apple's amazing marketing system, which is, it doesn't tell you what each, let's say, device does. It shows you why it matters. And in the same way, you're just reusing that same sort of analogy with why it matters so much to remind yourself why you're doing and why your impact in the work that you're doing can be a lot greater than you might think it does for a couple of days or while you're doing it. And you've interviewed a lot of people and studied a lot of companies. So I want to take you into that area now. What's one surprising thing that you've learned about how purpose-driven workplaces impact employee happiness and success?
That's a good question. Okay, so there's a neat company, and I know I keep going to these other companies, but I think it's fun to point out examples of people doing stuff right. So there's a neat company. They make these things called Big Joe products. It's called Comfort Research. They're awesome. I was able to interview their CEO and founder, Matt Young, about this. He started the company in college, which is pretty cool. They wanted a big beanbag, and they cut up a couch and made a giant beanbag. Good for them. It's awesome. But they didn't want to have a company like other companies. And so he's constantly shifting how their organization interacts with their employees and their clients and how the culture of the organization works. So he's hyper aware of the inner workings of his organization. So they ended up coming up with, how can we reinforce the behavior we want from our team members, right? Like, so how can we gamify things that they want to do? And so what he's ended up doing is creating a bunch of different awards that they give out to people. So like awards for like most innovative new idea that you brought to the table that became a product of ours, right? For product development. And they have huge ceremonies. They hang them on the wall inside their room. And so that you're enforcing like, hey, if you come up with a cool idea, you could be on that wall too. Then they give out other awards and even prize money to people like being an awesome human award. And so it's for something outside of work. And so like somebody that got it recently was one of their managers had just adopted 2 children, right? Like that's an awesome human thing to do, right? And so they celebrated him for that, because when you celebrate the stuff that you're doing outside of work, it doesn't just seem like a job. It seems like people that actually care about you. And so I do think that the blending of work and life have blended too close together, honestly. But if you do it in the right way, where people don't feel pressure, but they feel celebrated for having life outside of work, it really does a huge number on how the employees feel about the organization. And so his goal isn't to have people stay forever. His goal is to have an organization where people never want to leave. And so that, I think therein lies a bigger difference. And he's done a great job of that. And it's a really cool company. Heck, I have some of his pool toys. They're awesome. And so, yeah, it's wild to watch how different people approach different organizations. And the stories behind how companies start, it's just fascinating to me. Because it's neat how an idea starts out literally just as a thought, and then words, and then a plan, and then boom, you have this company that's sold in every major retail outlet anywhere in the world. And so it's fascinating. I love watching and finding out like the back end stories of these companies.
And I want to look into the future now. Let's put your goggles onto the, time shifting. So I want to take you into the world of AI, specifically about human-centric, even in today's world where everything started becoming hyper-focused, hyper-connected, and is full of technology. For young audience that is now starting to become really worried about AI taking over their workplace or getting replaced or getting left behind, what skills or mindsets do you, Joshua, think in this situation might matter the most, especially when we look ahead in 10 years?
Okay, this is going to get really philosophical, but I'm so excited about this part of the conversation.
Okay, let's hear.
For the past 30 years, right, our huge shifts have been technological, right? Huge shift of the internet, huge shift to social media, huge shift now to ChatGPT and to AI, and this is wild, right? It's an exciting, it can be a scary time, right? However, what I want for the world, right? What I think the world needs is I want to see the next big shift being human. And the reason I say that is because, yes, AI is going to take over all the menial tasks that we have to do, okay? It just is. It's going to take over all the mundane things like responding to emails or research or gathering additional information. It can write me a better proposal than I would ever write myself, right? So all those menial tasks are now over to the side. It's handled by, my little AI assistant. Great. What does that leave me to do, right? And therein lies the next question, right? So I think the next big shift needs to be human, because in this future of work where all the tasks are going to be taken care of, right? All the menial job functions will be taken care of. What's going to matter more than anything else are going to be the soft skills, right? How we communicate with other people, how we connect with other human beings, because AI is a very powerful tool, right? But in the hands of somebody that doesn't know how to do it, it's not very useful, right? People are going to say, I'll have to learn how to interact and how to build these things in the back end. But what's going to matter more, because the human element's going to be so much more important, right? Is we're going to have to shift the way that we view our work. I think it's when we view more towards, I'll say, a purpose mindset, right? Like thinking in terms of what's the purpose of this? What is the impact I'm making? What's the meaning behind it? That allows us to derive this new fulfillment from it. It's a scary future, if only because we don't know what it really holds. I'm not scared of the future, worried about it. I'm excited to see where it goes. But I think in this future where technology is taking over so many parts of our lives, it's going to matter even more, because a good communicator, human-to-human communicator, is going to be invaluable in this future where everybody's going to be communicating through technology. And so that therein lies, I think, why I hope the next big shift is a human one. And I don't know if that comes through like huge collective consciousness, or if it comes from people finding a job that they actually love or starting their own businesses. I don't think that we have to start our own company to love the work that we're doing, right? And I've said this, and I mean it. Purpose is not reserved for philanthropists and Patagonia employees, right? Everybody deserves the deep fulfillment that comes from seeing purpose in the work that you're doing. Just so few people choose to look for it. It's easier to complain.
Well said. Well said. Absolutely. I mean, I think you're one of the very few people that feels enthusiastic and excited to see where this new path with technology is going to take us. A lot of people feel perhaps negative, let's say, minded, or are a little worried in terms of how this will affect the trends that they're already that are efficient, and that they have to change the way that they think. But I think if you're not afraid of change, then everything that you've just said to the listener and to me, which I've learned a lot, is going to be absolutely impactful and helpful when we are going to be faced with this. And the human element now is, I think, one of the best things that you could have replied to as an answer, because I think it's really needed. And to feel heard and seen by someone is one of the best things that you could do, especially when all of our work perhaps relies already online for people working remote or hybrid. And now I've got a little interesting challenge for you. Okay. Can you finish the sentence? If you want to be an enthusiastic and purpose-driven person in today's world, start by.
I'm going to repeat it. So if you want to be an enthusiastic and purpose-driven person in this world, start by acting like one.
Start by acting like one. Because I think it's the whole purpose of your morning routine that takes you to focus your emotional, your spiritual, and your mental side to get your intention set for the day, to see how you're going to tackle the world. And no matter if yesterday was not as productive as you wanted to do, today is a fresh start, and you can go ahead and do it just with setting your intentions. And I think this is one of the most real answers that I've heard so far. Start by acting like one. It's very simple, yet it's true. And now I want to take you into the world of literature, because I love to read. I've got full bookshelf behind me.
I love to read too.
Exactly. We're both book nerds. Let's go. And for me, at least, I'm really passionate and interested to see what your top 2 books would be that, say, completely transformed your life or your perspectives to which you viewed life.
That's a good question. Okay, so I don't have favorites off the top of my mind. If you give me a second to think, do you want like fiction books that changed my life, nonfiction books, business books, anything?
Fiction and nonfiction. All right, let's take a look. So much to decide.
Okay, so fiction-wise, I read The Hobbit.
Okay.
At least
Hobbit
2 times a year, maybe 3 times a year. Now, it's ridiculous, I know, but I just love it. It's a book that I love, and I enjoy reading it, and it's probably one of my favorite books just because I feel like it was so well written. Now, Lord of the Rings is great too, but it's this thick, and The Hobbit's that thick, and so I can get through it a couple of times in a year. So I love that. Now, I know it's a ridiculous answer, but there it is. And then, as far as business books, stuff that set me apart, I mean, there's so many good ones. And if I had to really, one that impacted me personally, I'm literally looking at my shelf trying to decide. I don't have a good answer for that. Because it's funny, books, they shift, right? They evolve. Yeah. As you evolve as a human, I go back, and every time I reread a book, I look at it from a new lens, a different angle, a different idea. I was literally rereading a book called The Purple Cow. So it's a marketing book, right? And not that I love reading marketing books, but I need to, right? It's good for my business. And everything that I highlighted in there, while it was good, I highlighted the first time I read it. I just finished rereading it actually this morning. But if I had a highlighter in my hand, I would have highlighted different things this time. And so I like to encourage people, like, oh, I've already read it, I don't need to read it again. It's like, I encourage people, read a book, right, that moved you, right, that changed something about you, reread it later, years later, and just to revisit those ideas, because I gain so much more clarity on those ideas. If I've already implemented a few things in it, and then you see something new, and it's wild to get these new revelations from a piece of literature that you've already read. And so, yes, I love reading. I'm a big reader. I force myself to read a lot of business books, right? But at nighttime, I go in and I read.
Me too. Yeah, I think it's so important to get both lenses and be inspired and get creative, but at the same time also learn new stuff and new methods, new analogies, new blueprints for, let's say, handling your dream life. And I think this advice really, you spoke really personally to me, because I'm guilty for never rereading a book, because I just think that there's so many titles out there that keep coming out every single year. And I think there's this like over production that I can't escape, and that I need to read so many from so many different genres. And so to hear that you're actually rereading The Hobbit multiple times and you coming back to it, and every single time you get a shift, or perhaps you see it in a different way, is really made me think a little if what I'm doing is should be changed a little.
Well, and you can't consume everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's impossible.
It's impossible.
Even with audiobooks, like I just don't, there's not enough time in the day. And so, I mean, you got to be, all right, and this is a silly piece of advice. I used to, if I started a book, I would force myself to finish it.
Me too.
I'm now giving myself permission. If I start a book and I don't like it, I'll give it a couple chapters and I will put it down. Nope, it's not worth my time. I used to force myself to like finish the book. Like I start it. No, not anymore. I'm being more discerning with what I read, just because why am I going to finish a book I don't like? Right? In fact, if somebody starts reading my book and like, I don't like this, then don't read it. Like, don't force yourself to finish the book. Like, I'd rather you not read it and go read something you want. Because everybody's tone is different, everybody brings different ideas. And like my latest book, it's structured different from a lot of other books. It's weird. It's a compilation of stories and insights and interviews. And it's not just a book of interviews. It's not just a book of stories, and it's not just a book of here's how to fix your business or here's how to find purpose in your life. It's a combination of these things. And I think it's not every book is meant for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to end on that. That's rough. But no, as I said, I'm comfortable not finishing a book if I don't like it.
I agree. I should really take your advice and put it to some great use. Now, I want to take you back in time to when you were 17. And I have a specific question for you, because I'm also 17 and I love hearing people's insights and thoughts on this. If you could go back to your younger self, what's the one biggest piece of advice that you could tell yourself?
Well, when I was 17, I should have invested in Apple, because it would be worth a lot of money. Or maybe tell myself to buy more Bitcoin. I don't know. As far as advice for life, I don't know if I'd want to go back and give myself anything, because I could tell myself a lesson, or I could allow myself to experience the things that brought on that lesson. And that would help me learn the lesson better. And so if I think back to some of the hard lessons you learn, in youth, where like, you will be betrayed by somebody you care about, or you will lose somebody that you love to death. Like, those little things are going to happen. And I can be like, hey, just so you know, this is going to happen. Nothing actually prepares you for the actual point of betrayal, right? We'll use that one as the example. You need to go through that so you can understand, so you can experience those things. And that's what makes this entire human experience worth it, right? The parts where you do feel pressure, or where you feel hurt, or you do feel betrayed. And then you can turn around and still look at somebody lovingly, or do an act of kindness, or positively impact somebody else's life, and realize you need both of these things. And so while I have tough times at moments and emotions that kind of pull on me, I'm thankful for those moments. And so I wouldn't want me not to have any of those experiences, because that's what made me who I am. I wouldn't go back and change or give myself a piece of advice. I'd want him to learn those things. I might tell myself to be more open-minded, to try more new things, right? Just because the more experiences, that's what this life is about, right? It's not about the things, it's about the experiences. Maybe that would be the piece of advice. Not that I was always chasing things, but early in my career, I was chasing titles and money and, the big house and the car and all those things. And it's getting them doesn't change anything, right? It all comes down to the experience. What's your experience? What do you want your experience to be in this life? And I think if we can dive deep enough and be introspective enough to ask ourselves those questions, it'll be a much more fulfilling life because we'll be pursuing something we actually want instead of just jumping on autopilot and jumping into a job for 40 years. So,
Yeah, and I want to follow you up on this one and dive a little deeper and ask you now, more into the present, how much time did it take you to figure out what your morning routine with, I mean, far beyond the social media so-called morning routine where you wake up, have a cup of coffee, run and come back, but really be present in the moment? How much time did it take you to realize that this works for you and you wouldn't have it any other way?
So I would say the first time I did this sort of morning routine, that day I was super productive. I felt like I was on jet fuel. I got so much done. And I was like, that was crazy. Maybe it was that morning routine. And then I mean, the next day, same thing. Next day, same thing. And it's wild because it's like, okay, there's a huge difference, right? And then there's days I've missed, right? And I don't do my morning routine and then I'm just sluggish. I just drag myself through the day. I don't really get stuff done. I start things but don't finish things. And it was immediate for me when I started morning routine, the impact it had. Now, how did I develop that routine? I've read a few books. I know about meditation. I used to meditate a lot before work. I do occasionally journal, but it wasn't like a habit. I was exercising, but not as regularly as I should have. And I know the things that are good for me. Right? We know what puts us in our best thing. We just don't force ourselves to do those things. We make excuses, right? And so it would be easy for me to set my alarm an hour later, sleep in, and then just get up and have coffee and breakfast and take the kids to school. But I won't be good the rest of the day. Like it's gonna hinder me, right? It's like letting the air out of one of my tires, right? Like it's gonna mess up the day. And so I don't want to do that. And so I just challenge people to find what puts you at your best, right? And I'll tell you what isn't your best is not waking up and scrolling social media. It's not getting up and jumping right into the day. I think managing your life from a place of quiet and then going and doing the things you need to do is a much more effective way. And so it's taken me years to really do this. And especially before I started my own business, I mean, I was on a much tighter schedule, right? I had to be in an office for 40 hours of the week plus, right? Or traveling for that work. And so I wasn't nearly as good at cutting out the time that I would have needed then. And so now the freedom that I have in having my own business, I'm able to really witness when I'm really effective because there's less outside factors with me now, right? And so I can see the changes and I can see the impact that all these little choices make. And so, yeah, it took me years to kind of figure out exactly what I wanted. And I'm still changing it, right? Like I'm still adding little things here, or maybe I'll try this and see what really works. And you have to do what's best for you. And it might not be the best routine for everybody, but it's the best routine I've put together for myself yet.
Yeah. And I've started the podcast with you talking directly to the listener now. Joshua, I want to take your attention back to the listener and end it in the same way. So if you have one habit or routine or advice that you would like, let's say an end note or an end message that you would like to leave them with, what would it be?
Every day you get to choose how you show up. Every day.
Every day you get to choose how you show up. You decide whether you're going to tackle it on with productivity or whether you're going to be grumpy for the day. It's all up to you. I agree. I love that, Joshua. Thank you so much for being on the SMARTA Podcast.
Absolutely.
It was truly a pleasure.
I appreciate it, Sonia. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in to rate this episode 5 stars on podcasts or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, because that's going to keep us getting amazing content out to you and amazing people that fuel you with energy, with passion, and with science-backed research advice to make your life better. And now, if nobody told you this today, I want to be the first that tells you that I believe in you and I truly think that you can create the life of your dreams. Thank you. Bye-bye now. See you next Monday.